I think we should be better than the Democrats. The Democrats immediately rush to impeachment without hearings, this and that. I think there needs to be continued investigation.
Senator Rand Paul yesterday on the discussion in the House of Representatives under Kevin McCarthy about launching an inquiry into the possible impeachment of lunch bucket Joe Biden. Rand Paul's not always right. He's right a lot of the time. And he's been violently attacked by Democrats more than your average senator. A lot more than your average senator. Well, good Thursday to you and welcome once again. We remain at 888-630-9625. And Hunter Biden, I'm guessing he was probably up all night, but this time not because of cocaine intake. Probably just a little bit of stress since the Trump-appointed judge, recommended by two Democrat senators from Delaware, didn't play ball, didn't do what the Biden Justice Department expected her to do, and rubber stamped this corrupt deal that would have given Hunter Biden blanket immunity going forward from prosecution for, I think, more or less anything. I think he could have started shooting people on Fifth Avenue and he would have been fine based on the plea agreement. And he got a little slap on the wrist. We already knew he was going to pay some back taxes, but then they said, oh, sure, the 2 years where he had tax problems, he'll pay some back taxes for that. But now you can't prosecute him for any other tax problems going forward for any other years. And now we're done with this gun charge, and he gets a slap on the wrist, what they call a diversion program or diversionary program. I think a diversion program in there. And that's nothing. It amounts to nothing, right? Because he's Joe Biden's son. Don't you know who I am? It's amazing stuff. And again, Andrew McCarthy, writing in the New York Post, the former prosecutor, the fix was in for Hunter Biden until a hero judge stepped in. And Andrew McCarthy summed it up very well, I think, that, if you're trying to pull off a corrupt deal, one that is actually political theater, but you're trying to masquerade it as law, you'd better make sure the judge is in on it. When it came to that little detail, the Biden administration dropped the ball. Judge Mary Ellen Noreika instead did her job. That's why Hunter Biden's sweetheart plea bargain blew up in Delaware federal court on Wednesday. Instead, what was happening here in every normal criminal case is that every legitimate investigation, you have adversarial parties, the defense looking out for the accused's interests. That's Hunter Biden, his defense team, and the Justice Department looking out for the public interest. That means government attorneys are appropriately aggressive in prosecuting lawbreakers. In fact, Justice Department plea bargain standards generally call for requiring the defendant to plead guilty to, at a minimum, the most serious, readily provable charge. You see, but the fix was in here. So, and as Andrew McCarthy points out, the Biden investigation is continuing, even expanding. And the judge asked about that, and they're like, oh yeah, the case is ongoing. And the defense team freaked out and panicked in the courtroom. But we already know the Justice Department could have readily proved serious tax felonies. They reduced them to misdemeanors, involving more than $10 million in income and a gun offense carrying a potential 10-year prison sentence. Alas, there is nothing standard about the Hunter Biden case, writes Andrew McCarthy. That's because the parties are not adversaries. They are in cahoots. They're in cahoots. That's always a fun word. Thus did the president's son and the president's Justice Department conspire to orchestrate a plea deal that would have, A, allowed Hunter Biden to escape prison and be given immunity from future prosecution over the Biden family business of cashing in on President Biden's political influence and then Vice President Biden's political influence, and B, allow the Biden administration to pretend that with independence and integrity, the president had allowed the Justice Department to prosecute his own son. Now, here's the thing. There's kind of a funny wrinkle in all of this. The Justice Department and the White House, they've been saying, well, we can't possibly answer any questions about this because the investigation is ongoing. wink, wink. And that was their excuse, their blanket excuse used again and again for not taking or not answering any questions having to do with the investigation or the prosecution of President Biden's son, Hunter Biden, the crack-smoking, stripper, knocker-upper, Russian hooker dating punk son, who's he's like on the vice chairman of the board of the United States of America or something. And they use this excuse, this blanket excuse, that we can't answer any questions. We're not going to have press conferences. We're not going to talk about that. And the reason we're not going to talk about that is because there's an ongoing investigation, right? There's an ongoing investigation, so we can't possibly talk about that. And then they got into court, and the judge said, well, wait a minute, we're striking a plea deal here, but is there an ongoing investigation? And they said, yes, there is an ongoing investigation. And at that point, the defense freaked out. What do you mean there's still an ongoing investigation? Into my client? Yes, and they knew that, but no, it's all theater, and they're pretending. And here's the thing. It's the plea agreement. They agreed to not prosecute any further, but if there's an ongoing case, which is what they said as their excuse for not answering questions, then how can we strike a plea deal when the case is not done? And how can we give immunity going forward when the case is still being investigated? And so, once again, they're kind of hoist on their own petard here. They're petarded. They got petarded. And, so the judge did a great thing here. The Justice Department is exposed as a gang of corrupt gangsters that were just licking the boots of Joe Biden and the Biden family. Can you imagine being such a loser that you go to law school, you become a senior official at the Justice Department, and you're so corrupt, you're such a loser that you just rig this whole prosecution of the president's son, and you go into a court with a smirk on your face and say, well, we're going to plead guilty to minor tax charges on the condition that no other tax charges be filed, and to a gun charge on the condition that he gets a slap on the wrist. And as part of this plea agreement, we can't be prosecuted for anything going forward, anything having to do with family corruption or bribery or violations of the Foreign Agents Registration Act. We can't be prosecuted for anything going forward. What a deal. And the judge noticed that and said, because she asked the question, well, is the investigation, is the case ongoing? And they said yes. And they had to say yes because that's been their excuse for not answering any questions for months now, right? But once the judge said, well, it's still ongoing, aren't we premature in striking a plea agreement that guarantees no further prosecution of crimes you may find as the investigation progresses? And they shrugged and said, well, I guess you caught us. Caught us this time. Now we're hoist on our own petard. Yeah, by claiming Hunter Biden was still under investigation, they couldn't reply. We can't comment on any ongoing investigation. And yet the plea agreement, they had agreed to not prosecute any further going forward. And the judge spotted this and caught them. And that means the Justice Department is filthy, rotten, corrupt. And this guy, David Weiss, the U.S. attorney in Delaware, who they keep telling us was a Trump appointee, but only after he was twice an Obama appointee and then recommended by two Democrat Delaware senators to President Trump. And he said, okay, I'll keep this guy. And then when Joe Biden came in and demanded the resignation of all of the U.S. attorneys across the country, this David Weiss was the one exception. And they said, oh, that's because we're so legitimate. We're so serious about the rule of law. We know he's investigating us, so we're going to leave him in place. No, you're going to leave him in place because he was made interim U.S. Attorney for Delaware by Barack Obama, and then acting U.S. Attorney for Delaware by Barack Obama, and then recommended by the two Delaware senators to President Trump. So to pretend that he's some big Republican or Trump appointee is a big lie. It's another big lie. There are 10,000 ways to lie in the naked city, and we had about 20 of them on parade yesterday. It was pretty amazing. So good for the judge. Shame on the Department of Justice. Hoist on their own petard. Wonderful. Just wonderful. And with that, let's go to That's good. We've got audio that we need to get to, don't we? But before we do that, let's go to the telephones, because we like to talk to the nice people, American people, normal people, voters, taxpayers, Americans. Let's go to Jeannie calling from Florida, where, Cocoa Beach. I dream of Jeannie. Jeannie, you're on the Chris Plant Show.
Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Jeannie.
I'm still a Delaware girl. I grew up in Newcastle, Delaware, which was founded in 1659. The kids were raised to be very concerned and keeping the law. If you drove a car and you were speeding, the officer was able to pull you out of the car, depending on the situation, leave the car standing there, and take you off to jail, as well as people that didn't pay alimony, and a few other things. When I crossed the green in Newcastle when I was a little girl in grade school, they had a whipping post, and until 1972, I could hear the whips cracking and the guys hollering. I have to smile at this whole thing because Biden lives there. He should have sense enough to know what the Delaware courts are, because the DuPonts, God love them, helped the Delaware people and everything, but they created a monopoly worldwide in the chemical business, and the courts took them to task, and they had to divide their monopoly. Among other things, presently the Boy Scouts had an abuse claim with the Boy Scout troop, which is in progress now. They are splitting $2.6 billion between 82,000 victims worldwide, and the Delaware is handling the bankruptcy for the Boy Scouts.
Well, Jeannie, let me jump in here.
These are just examples.
Examples, and I think what you're trying to say is that Delaware is something of a law and order state, or has historically been a law and order state, and that the Bidens should not have assumed that they're going to be able to get away with all of this. That's what you're attempting to convey?
Yes, and also I worked at a country club in Delaware, which I was in management there. This was back in the 60s. And I mean this not disrespectfully, but the very extremely wealthy, we're talking about the Rolls-Royce, show-driven, diamonds, the whole 9 yards. And they just, any whim was given.
Well, and the Biden family is behaving like the Rolls-Royce chauffeur-driven Delaware DuPonts, assuming that they can get away with everything, right, Jeannie? And now this was a federal judge and not a state judge, but you're saying that they shouldn't assume that they can get away with all of this in Delaware, because Delaware is a state with a long history of law and order, right, Jeannie?
Well, it was the first state. But the point that I'm trying to make is that these people, I'm not disrespecting anything or critiquing anything, but the people I took care of the Bidens years ago, and all the other people. They had 5,000 members. It was my job to let them have whatever they wanted to make them happy.
Well, I at a time, I know Delaware is a wonderful place. There are a lot of wealthy people there. Joe Biden, I guess, envied them and wanted to be among them. And so he took millions and millions of dollars from Ukraine, for example. And, and all of this is the Biden family feels that they can get away with anything. And yesterday, Jeannie, there was a judge that got in the way of their little dream. And that's good for all of us and good for the United States of America. Thank you, Jeannie. Have a wonderful Florida day. I've got breaking news for you. President Biden's plan to introduce the digital dollar is already in progress, and it's vital to understand the potential consequences because, contrary to their phony baloney claims, this initiative is not in your best interest. Time is of the essence, so take action now. It's absolutely necessary to protect yourself and your future, your savings, your retirement. You can help protect your savings from the risk of the digital dollar by diversifying with gold and silver IRAs. Call the experts at American Alternative Assets. Call American Alternative Assets today at 888-4GOLD-20. 4GOLD-20. 888-446-5360. And get your guidance on safeguarding your retirement and your savings. Say no to Joe Biden's digital dollar. Call 888-4GOLD-20. 888-446-5360. Call them now. Individual results may vary. There's no guarantee that past performance will be indicative of future results. Seek your own legal, tax, investment, and financial advice before opening an account. Yeah. All right, we have lots of great audio for you, legal and political, on Hunter Biden's day in court. We are at 888-630-9625. Hey, it's Chris Plant, excited to tell you about our July 2024 Listener Sea Cruise. We'll be sailing around the British Isles, visiting Scotland and Ireland. Please join us. Book by this July 31st for extra savings. Visit ChrisPlantCruise.com. Now, the Daily Caller is reporting this morning that Joe Biden's Merrick Garland-led Department of Justice last night dropped campaign finance charges against Democratic mega donor and alleged fraudster Sam Bankman-Fried, who fled to the Bahamas. But the Biden administration, he's a huge Democrat donor who had this phony cryptocurrency thing, and he had to flee the country, and now they're quietly dropping charges. The Department of Justice dropped a campaign finance charge against disgraced former crypto tycoon Sam Bankman-Fried. They call him SBF because everything has to be an abbreviation. They did this last night on Wednesday night, according to a court document from the Southern District of New York. Authorities assert that Sam Bankman-Fried, co-founder of a bankrupt crypto exchange, FTX, and his associates utilized customer deposits for $90 million in campaign contributions to around 300 candidates or political action committees. Huge Democrat donor. That, according to the New York Times, the Department of Justice letter to the New York court states that it is not pursuing the charge because the Bahamas did not plan to extradite Sam Bankman-Fried to the U.S. to face the music. The government has been informed that the Bahamas notified the United States earlier today that the Bahamas did not intend to extradite the defendant on the campaign contribution count, the letter asserts. Accordingly, and in keeping with its treaty obligations to the Bahamas, the government does not intend to proceed to trial on the campaign contributions count. Now, that is, it is good to be a Democrat, isn't it? So he went to and the Bahamas said they're not going to extradite him. That doesn't mean you drop all charges. That means you wait for him to go someplace else. That means he's trapped in the Bahamas now. But hey, if you just drop the charges, Sam Bankman-Fried contributed nearly $39 million to Democrat-aligned causes, emerging as the second largest individual donor to them in the 2022 midterm cycle, according to the radical left-wing Washington Post, using FEC data. I've got to say, this Daily Caller story is utterly schizophrenic about Sam Bankman-Fried by Jason Cohen. It says the Justice Department dropped a campaign finance charge against Sam Bankman-Fried, big Democrat donor. They said they did it because the Bahamas notified the United States that they did not intend to extradite Sam Bankman-Fried to the United States on the campaign contributions count. And further down in the Daily Caller story, it says the Bahamas speedily extradited Sam Bankman-Fried to the United States in December when FTX collapsed, according to the New York Times. Quoting the New York Times. Man, oh man. And it says prosecutors requested that he be jailed, but instead Sam Bankman-Fried is in the United States, living in California at his parents' residence, and released on $250 million bond, and he's facing other charges in October. So I'm going to have to sort this out, and I'm going to have to call Jason Cohen at the Daily Caller and ask him, what the heck? And I have to say, what the heck? Completely crazy. Man, oh man, oh man. So, all right, let's go to some audio here on the Hunter Biden fiasco. Now, the legal scholar and law professor Jonathan Turley was yesterday on the Fox News channel talking about, and he was trying to figure out as we were going along what was unfolding yesterday before our very eyes. And it kept going back and forth and back and forth. The deal was on when they walked through the door. Plea deal that had been hammered out before they ever showed up yesterday morning. Once they got into the courtroom, the judge, how dare she, started asking questions, discovered that it was fixed, it was rigged, it was crooked, it was corrupt, that the Justice Department and U.S. Attorney for Delaware David Weiss had cobbled together this incredible sweetheart deal for Hunter Biden and the Biden family. And it was truly outrageous. And when Judge Noriega figured it out, the kibosh was put on the whole thing. Wait a minute, blanket immunity going forward while there's an ongoing Justice Department investigation on which we've spent many millions and millions of dollars over the course of who knows how many years, at least 4 years. And now he's going to get a slap on the wrist and walk out the door, and it's going to stink like the third world. Jonathan Turley yesterday on the Fox News channel talking about the deal that we only discovered after the judge asked questions. And David Weiss looks like a crook, the U.S. Attorney in Delaware. Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, looks like a crook again. The Justice Department again looks like a third world house of corruption. Joe Biden stinks of corruption, and that's all fine. Professor Jonathan Turley yesterday on the Fox News channel.
The problem with a plea agreement is you can't actually type in wink and nod, right? I mean, the problem with this agreement is that the judge read it and said, what is this? And part of the obligation of the court is to make sure that the defendant and the government are very clear on what the agreement means. And they weren't, and it broke down with the most basic questions. That was what was so surprising here.
That's what was so surprising here. You can't write in the plea agreement there's a wink and a nod, but there was a wink and a nod. And again, had there been some Obama-Biden judge in the chair, then the corruption would have survived. And then the news media plays the very important role of shoring up the corruption for the Democrat Party and the Biden family and the Merrick Garland Justice Department, because our media is the most corrupt institution in the United States of America. And again, I've talked about it many times before. Benito Mussolini's definition of fascism is a merger of state and corporate power. And what corporate power is more important than the information oligarchs? Why they became apoplectic when Twitter was taken away from them. You notice that Jack Dorsey has vanished. He got $42 billion, whatever it was, for Twitter. And boy, he might be on another planet. He's just gone. Can't find him. Here's Jonathan Turley yesterday talking about the questions asked by the judge that just blew the whole thing up. The wheels came off right away. And the Justice Department came in there with this plea deal, this sweetheart deal for the Bidens, with a straight face. And with 3 easy questions, the whole thing was exposed as a corrupt ruse benefiting the Biden family and corrupting justice in the United States of America once again.
These are the types of questions as a defense counsel you work out with prosecutors in advance. But she basically asked one question and the whole darn thing fell apart. And so the question now is, where do you go from here? It's like a wedding where both the bride and the groom objected. And everyone else is sitting there saying, wait, how did we get here? And where do we go from here?
Tell me, where do we go from here? And of course, he would have been immune from prosecution for further tax issues. And there are many more tax issues coming down the pipeline. And we would, of course, all be in very, very deep trouble if we took in millions of dollars from Chinese business conglomerate and honestly, the Ukrainians, the Romanians, the Chinese, and this was going to be a slap on the wrist, pay the fine, and then get on with your organized crime family antics and hijinks, both antics and hijinks. Jonathan Turley, the law professor, it was supposed to be a 30-minute rubber-stamped deal, and Hunter Biden was going to walk out smiling with his highly paid defense team, and they were going to hold a press conference. Now all of this is behind us, and they wouldn't mention the immunity clause in there. And the so-called news media would just say, well, now the Republicans have to stop talking about this. This has been litigated. This has been settled in court. And now we're done, right? But the judge said, is there an ongoing criminal investigation? Yes, Your Honor. The defense freaked out, and Jonathan Turley noticed this too.
This was all supposed to be scripted. It was all supposed to be easy. And now it's off script, and it's anything but easy, because the judge just raised the one charge that the White House most fears, which is the chance that Hunter was a foreign agent. And if he was a foreign agent, the question is foreign agent for who and for what purpose? The president was that purpose. If you're influence peddling, it's influence over the president.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the vice president. The Foreign Agents Registration Act, FARA, for which, let's see, how many Trump administration officials were prosecuted for that when it was completely phony? And here's Hunter Biden, foreign agent for Ukraine, foreign agent for Romania, foreign agent for Communist China, CEFC, the Chinese Communist Energy Company. And when did Hunter Biden become an international expert on energy matters? The answer is never. This is the dirtiest, most crooked family ever to occupy the White House. And by the way, Hunter Biden is apparently living in the White House. And one of Joe Biden's granddaughters is living in the White House with her husband, whom she married at the White House a few months ago. And all of this is okay, right? Jonathan Turley on, hey, wow, can't believe that happened. The whole Washington establishment was rattled by that.
So the whole purpose of this deal is collapsing as we're watching it. And it's taken Washington by utter surprise. I was on the Hill talking with members, and everyone was floored.
And everyone was floored on Capitol Hill. Like, wow, what happened? Now, there's another dimension to all of this, and that is the judge discovered that a Democrat legal operative working on behalf of Hunter Biden contacted the judge's chambers the day before yesterday and misrepresented herself, saying that she was speaking for the House Oversight Committee, one of the House committees that was investigating Hunter Biden. And the woman was lying. And they have the woman's name and everything. And she called the judge's chambers, got a hold of a clerk, misrepresented herself as representing the Republicans in Congress, and asked the clerk in the judge's office to remove documents that had been provided to the judge by the Republican members of Congress. And the Washington Free Beacon has the story, but the Washington Post doesn't. Judge says Hunter Biden legal team impersonated Republican to hide evidence, threatens sanctions. A federal judge on Tuesday accused Hunter Biden's legal team of pretending to work for a Republican congressman to get a court filing removed from the public docket. U.S. District Judge Mary Ellen Noreika, who's set to decide whether to approve Joe Biden's plea deal, yesterday's story on tax and gun charges, said that a member of his legal team, Hunter Biden's legal team, misrepresented who she worked for to get evidence removed from the docket. Judge Noreika threatened to place sanctions on the lawyers. That should still happen. You should be disbarred for doing something like this. Judge Noriega said the staffer falsely claimed to work for the lawyers employed by Republican Representative Jason Smith, the Republican from Missouri, who chairs the House Ways and Means Committee. Smith had submitted an amicus brief in the case, which was removed from the docket after a staffer for Biden's lawyers called the court. In the filing, Congressman Smith urged the judge to consider recent testimony by IRS whistleblowers that their investigation of Biden and the resulting prosecution were held back by political considerations. Now, this is completely nuts. They've got the name of the woman that called the judge's chambers, spoke to the clerk, and lied, misrepresented, and then they denied it later, of course, because what are you going to do? So the defendant appears to have benefited from political interference, which calls into question the propriety of the investigation of the U.S. Attorney's Office. Just amazing, Congressman Smith's attorney wrote. It is critical that the court consider the whistleblower materials before determining whether to accept the plea agreement. Now, Biden's team said that the issue appears to stem from an unfortunate and unintentional miscommunication between a staff member at our firm and employees of the court. They fed that BS to CNN, and CNN dutifully reproduced it on the internet and doubtless on television too, but nobody was watching. The judge said the staffer called to have items removed, claiming to work for a Republican representative. That's Congressman Smith. It appeared the caller misrepresented her identity and who she worked for in an attempt to improperly convince the clerk's office to remove the amicus materials from the docket, the judge said yesterday. Jessica Bangles, a staffer for the Biden law firm, said she called the court but denied pretending to work for Congressman Smith. Or Congressman Smith's lawyer, Ted Tequila. I'm going to go with Tequila, like To Kill a Mockingbird. I am completely confident that I never indicated that I was calling from Mr. Tequila's office, or Kitilla, and that I worked for him in any way, Bangles said in an affidavit to the judge. So apparently the clerk just got it all wrong, heard it all wrong. And when the representative calling to say, remove the amicus brief that's detrimental to Hunter Biden, I worked for Congressman Smith, and the clerk just misunderstood it all, right? And honestly, this is Jessica Bangles is now calling the clerk in the federal judge's office a liar. You got it all wrong. That's not what I said. That's not what I did. And the clerk's office is like, no, it is. It is what you said. It is what you did. And that's crooked as hell. And that's the kind of thing that you should be disbarred for. Like leaking the Supreme Court decision from the Supreme Court on the lead up to the Roe v. Wade being overturned decision in the Supreme Court. Still nobody been held accountable for that. Isn't that amazing? Again, day one, I would have gone in there and found out who it was within a matter of a couple of hours. CBD is everywhere. CBDs. They're putting CBDs in everything. And my friends at Generic CBD have infused it into their #1 best-selling, deep-penetrating muscle and joint cream. Let me tell you, this stuff is amazing. Check out the reviews online. It melts right into your knees, your elbows, your shoulders, your back, especially those stiff hands and your fingers. I'm going like this with my hands and my fingers right now. Goes to work in a matter of seconds, and it's a fantastic moisturizer. My best girl told me that, too. The company's called GenericCBD.com. You've heard me talk about them before. They sell premium CBD products for less cash. And right now, you can try their muscle and joint cream for free. It's free. You just pay $2.95 to help with the shipping and handling. But don't worry, it's not a subscription. There are no strings attached. They just want you to try it because they know you're going to love it. You're going to want more. You're going to buy some from mom. You're going to buy it as gifts. So get your free sample at GenericCBD.com. That's GenericCBD.com, GenericCBD.com. These products and statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease or illness. Yeah, I gotta say, we're more corrupt than ever before. And if only we had a legitimate fourth estate, a news media, that had some interest in holding the powerful accountable for their misdeeds, we'd be living in a very different country today. We are at 888-630-9625. There's more, and UFOs aren't called UFOs anymore, but we've got their bodies. And I know what you're thinking. Did we subject the alien bodies to anal probes like they do to us? That's coming up too. The Democrats on Capitol Hill today are pushing hard for more child genital mutilation in America. They're very much in favor of child genital mutilation in the United States of America. They want children who, aren't allowed to buy cold medicine to decide to change their genders and mutilate their genitals and take pharmaceuticals that will render them eunuchs for their entire lifetimes. And I'm going to have some of that coming up for you and then they attack Republicans because some Republicans actually oppose child genital mutilation in America. Let's take a phone call, Michael. Let's go to Ronnie, calling from Austin, Texas. Ronnie, you're on the Chris Plant Show.
Hello. I noticed that the space aliens have the technology, tremendous technology, to travel hundreds of thousands of light years to get to Earth, but they don't have the technology to avoid crashing.
You find that suspicious, do you, Ronnie?
I do. I think maybe they come here to learn how to fly from our people.
After traveling light years across the galaxy, they want to learn how to fly from our Navy pilots and our Air Force pilots. Yeah,
it's
maybe
the only way
we can teach them how to land.
Yeah, to land. Yeah, they can fly real good. Yeah,
that's very funny, Ronnie. Yeah, they don't know how to avoid crashing into the planet Earth after traveling from a galaxy far, far away. That's a good point, a good question, Ronnie, a fun one. Yeah, we do have space alien. There was a hearing on Capitol Hill yesterday. They're not UFOs anymore. Now they're UAPs. UAPs. You know what UAP means? We all have to learn a new abbreviation.